Welcome to the Retirement Made Easy podcast. I'm your host, Greg Gonzalez. My goal for the podcast is to help you live a better life in retirement by giving you the tools and information you need in a language that you can understand. And this episode is going to be no different. On a previous episode, I mentioned that many retirees or pre-retirees have a goal of helping to pay for or fund their grandchildren's college education. And many are not able to fund the entire college education of their grandchildren, but maybe they want to help out. Maybe they want to match what their grandchildren's parents are contributing towards this big college education expense that seems to be going up and up every single year as tuitions across the country seem to drastically rise. According to Forbes magazine, in February of 2020, our student loan crisis hit a record level, $1.6 trillion. Nowadays, it's not uncommon to talk to college graduates that have tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loans. So, as the parents or grandparents, one of your goals might be to help fund your children or grandchildren's college education. Personally, for me, this would be on the top of my list, is helping to fund children or grandchildren's college education. I know that's, in my opinion, the greatest gift you can help give someone. Of course, they've got to earn and do the work to get the degree. And I always think about a college education, a college degree, and how it's something that can be so meaningful to someone for the rest of their life. And really, it's a gift that can never be taken away from someone. So we'll talk about that on today's episode of the Retirement Made Easy podcast. Before we get into today's episode, I wanted to remind listeners to check out our website, which is retirementmadeeasypodcast.com. It's a mouthful, retirementmadeeasypodcast.com. While you're there, listeners can always send me your questions at the bottom of the website or check out our free resources, such as my retirement secret sauce or our 2020 tax planning guide, which a lot of people seem to like. So check those free resources out, and let's get into today's show. So the big question that many people have is, if I wanted to, how would I go about helping to save for my children or grandchildren's college education? What's the best way? And I want to preface this discussion with, hey, go talk to your financial planner. So, of course, I recommend getting a professional opinion from an advisor you like and trust. But the most common objection that I hear to funding a college savings plan, like a 529 college savings plan, which seems to be, by and large, the most popular. The objection that I hear from a lot of people is, what if we overfund the 529 account? Or if the grandson or granddaughter or son or daughter doesn't end up using the money for college? In other words, they don't go to college, they get a scholarship, they, go into the military and enlist, and then their education will be paid for. What if they don't end up using the funds? What happens? Is that money lost? Is it stuck? Can we get our hands on it? So I wanted to talk at first about 529 accounts because, like I said, they're the most popular. They are college savings plan accounts, and many states give you a state income tax deduction for the money that you contribute to them. So you can let your accountant know, hey, I contributed $500 to my grandson's 529 plan, and depending on the state that you live in, you might be able to deduct that on your taxes. So specifically, when it comes to 529 accounts, you can invest the money as you see fit. So you get to decide how the money that's in that 529 is invested. But getting back to the question of what if there's money left over in that account? Or what if the student doesn't end up using the funds for college? The way 529 plans work is the easiest way to go about that situation is to change the beneficiary on the account. So in other words, if you have a son and daughter, your son ends up going in the military and doesn't need the college savings 529 plan, you can change the beneficiary to your daughter's name, and now her name is on it. And then at that point, you would be able to use the funds for your daughter's college education. That would be the first step, is to look at maybe a sibling of the initial beneficiary who you had listed, the student in this case. And then if there wasn't a sibling who could possibly use the funds for their college education, then you might look at a blood relative. Maybe it was a cousin, and they might be able to use the funds for their college education. But let's assume that it was an only child. There are no other blood relatives that might be able to use the funds for college education. So you had to withdraw the funds out of the 529 plan. So what happens to the money? Let's say you put in $500. It grew to $600. So then in that situation, if the funds are not used for qualified education expenses for the beneficiary of the 529 plan, again, your son maybe went in the military and no longer needs the funds. Well, in that situation, you would have a 10% penalty on the growth. So you put in 500, it's worth 600. So you'd have a 10% penalty on the $100. And then you would pay taxes on the growth of the account, that $100 of growth. Of course, we always recommend speak with your CPA or your tax preparer, and they'll be able to help you with that situation. But the money is not lost. The money can be accessed. It's just you might have taxes and penalties that you might need to be aware of. And with that being said, this rarely happens in my experience. Typically, you can change the beneficiary to a sibling or a blood relative, or maybe the individual, the beneficiary, wants to take some kind of class or course in the future. Maybe it's a certification that they want to take. I had a client that their son was taking a coding class, and they were able to use the 529 plan to help pay for that. The next question I often get from clients or listeners of the podcast is, what are the benefits of a 529 plan? So I wanted to address those on the show. 529 plans used to be college savings accounts. That was their primary use. But a couple of years ago, they actually changed the rules, and 529 plans can now actually be used for K through 12, for private school, for children and grandchildren that you might have. Maybe it's a niece and nephew. However, most people still use these 529 accounts for college savings. That's their primary intended purpose. So the benefit of them is, of course, if you live in a state that offers a state tax deduction for the money you contribute to one, that might help you from a tax standpoint. So that's the number one advantage. Number two is the account owner maintains control of the funds in the 529 account. So let's say Jim, this imaginary 60-year-old person, wants to open up a 529 college savings plan for Jim's granddaughter. Jim is the account owner of the 529, and his granddaughter, Madison, is the beneficiary of the account. Madison doesn't have control over the account. She doesn't have any say in how the funds are invested. That's Jim's responsibility. He maintains control of the 529 account, and he kind of calls the shots of when and how the funds are used for Madison's college education at some point in the future. So that's an important point about 529s, and something people really like is they get to have that control of the money and make sure it's used for college education or qualified education expenses rather, and not, in the instance where Madison wants to buy a new scooter or a car or something like that. So in our example, Jim has that power to determine how the funds are used and ensure that they're used properly for their intended purpose, which was Madison's college education. The next big advantage about 529 college savings plans is that the money you contribute is allowed to be invested. So you might be able to invest in mutual funds that grow over time, and all the growth is tax-free, as long as at the end of the day, when the money is withdrawn from the account, the 529 account, as long as the money is used for qualified educational expenses, the money can be withdrawn tax-free without any penalty. So that's a huge advantage. In our example, Jim may contribute $1,000 a year between when Madison's born and when she goes to college when she's 18. And so if we did that for 18 years, that's $18,000. Let's assume it got good growth and Jim invested in some mutual funds within the 529 plan. Let's say it's worth $40,000 or $50,000 when Madison turns 18 and she's ready to go to college. The $50,000 could be withdrawn from the 529 plan and used for Madison's college education, as long as the funds were used for qualified educational expenses, like, for example, her tuition, or maybe books, or maybe other supplies that she needed for her college work. As long as they're used properly for those qualified education expenses, and you can look those up online, then there will be no penalty or taxes or any of that. The point I'm trying to make is the money in the 529 plan is not intended for Madison to go shopping for a new pair of jeans or shoes or something. Again, it's earmarked for college-related expenses. There was a new law that passed at the end of 2019. It's called the HERE Act. You can read up on it online, but it even extended the power of 529s. And these changes really opened up their applicable use for people. One of the changes is that 529 college savings plans can now be used for those that are in the trades. So if you were a person that was in a apprenticeship type program, you could now use your 529 for any trade school or vocational type program. And in addition to that, the Secure Act also said that 529 plans can help pay for existing student loans up to $10,000. There are some limitations to that depending on how many siblings or children there are in the family, so check those out with your tax preparer. But I actually ran into a person who had $9,000 in student loans that they were looking to pay off this next year. And so what we had talked about, it might make sense for them to open up a 529 college savings plan with $9,000 and then use the 529 college savings plan to pay off the student loan. What they would do is they would get a state income tax deduction here in the state of Missouri for the money that they contributed to the 529 plan. And every state is different on the amount of money that you are allowed to deduct from your state income taxes in a given year. Like I said, some states don't have a state income tax deduction for 529 contributions. In other states, like the state of Missouri, for example, a married couple who files jointly can deduct up to $16,000 per tax year. So check with your financial advisor, check with your trusted tax planner to make sure you understand what your state allows. And another point that I wanted to make is in regards to how you should invest or might consider investing the money that's in the 529 college savings plan. So, for example, if it were my own child and my daughter's name was Madison, for example, and she was age 17, meaning that she would need these funds next year to go to college, I would probably be inclined to invest the money very conservatively because she has a short time horizon before she needs the money for college. So you've got to ask yourself, when is this student going to need the funds? And if they're going to need the funds in 24 months or 12 months or a couple years, maybe it would be a good idea to not invest the money very aggressively because there's a lot of risk with that. However, if your granddaughter is 2 years old and so she wants to go to college maybe when she's 18, you've got 16 years, if my math is correct there, 16 years for these funds to grow tax-free in her 529 savings plan, so you can kind of invest it more aggressively throughout those 16 years because you've got time on your side. And then maybe as you get closer to her 18th birthday when the funds are needed, maybe you adjust the risk that you're taking in the 529. That's just something that you need to be aware of because as the owner of the 529 account, you're actually in charge or you have the responsibility of deciding how those funds should be invested. And also, it's always a good idea to have a backup owner, a successor owner on the plan. So if I were to open up the 529 plan for my son or daughter, I would want to put my wife on as the successor owner, heaven forbid, in case something happened to me as the primary owner of the account. And getting back to my point that I made earlier, that I have so many people that ask me how much I think is enough for a son or daughter or grandchild's college education. How much is enough to save? Well, quite frankly, it's going to depend on their goals and where they want to be educated. But in my opinion, in most cases, you really can't save enough. I mean, I was in Nashville not too long ago, and Vanderbilt University, I was told at the time on a trolley ride, we were taking a tour of Nashville, we were told that 1 year tuition at Vanderbilt University is $73,000. I was absolutely blown away. But that's the direction we're headed in this country. That's why we're in a student loan debt crisis in this country, is the price of college, the price of getting a college degree keeps going up and up and up because the availability of these student loans is so prevalent that the money can be borrowed. And in that case, when the capital is available, they keep raising the prices. So in my opinion, in most cases, it's really difficult to oversave or overfund a child or grandchild's college education. Now, in reality, not every student is going to go to Vanderbilt and spend $73,000 a year, and some students might even qualify for grants or a lot of these scholarships. So you've got to keep that in mind as well. I really, really recommend applying for as many scholarships as you possibly can. So I had one client, I'll kind of wrap this discussion up today with a story of a client of mine who, I'll keep his name anonymous, but he was a very generous guy, a very bright guy, and he wanted to help his grandchildren with their college education. And he thought, I can fund a 529 plan, but I'd like to see them apply for some scholarships and put some work into it. So he tested it out with his oldest granddaughter, and he told her he would give her $100 for every scholarship that she applied to. And all she had to do was make copies of the letter and the application for each scholarship, and he would give her $100 for every scholarship application she filled out and submitted. So it turned out after months and months that she applied for 40 different scholarships. So if you take 40 times $100 per scholarship, he had to write her a check for $4,000. And she was going to use that for her college expenses. And so at the end of the day, when all the results came back from all the scholarships, out of those 40 scholarships she applied for, she ended up getting 6 of them, which amounted to about $12,000 in scholarship awards that his granddaughter got. So 6 out of 40, that's not too good. But when you look at this client, this gentleman that gave his granddaughter, he fronted $4,000, and she ended up having $12,000 of tax-free scholarship money. So $16,000 is what her total take-home from not only her grandfather, but also the scholarships. I thought that was a pretty neat way of having his granddaughter have some skin in the game and put some effort forward to applying for those scholarships. And yeah, her results on a percentage basis weren't the best, but you can't argue with $12,000 tax-free money. So congratulations to his granddaughter. I hope today's conversation has been helpful when it comes to 529 plans. It was not meant to be the end-all be-all for a conversation on a 529 college savings plan, but they're becoming very, very popular with folks. They seem to like the advantages that they offer, and it's really a great way to save for grandchildren and children's college education, which seems to be on the rise. So if you have any future questions, again, go to my website, which is retirementmadeeasypodcast.com. And again, I'd be happy to help you with anything that I can. I'm Greg Gonzalez. I'll see you next time on a future episode of the Retirement Made Easy podcast. And remember, always dream big. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, please consult your attorney, tax advisor, or financial advisor prior to investing. This is a hypothetical example and is not representative of any specific investment. Your results may vary. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices mentioned are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. The SmartVestor program is a directory of investment professionals. Neither Dave Ramsey nor SmartVestor are affiliates of St. Louis Retirement Advisors or LPL Financial. There is no guarantee that a diversified portfolio will enhance overall returns or outperform a non-diversified portfolio. Diversification does not protect against market risk. All investing involves risk, including loss of principal. No strategy assures success or protects against loss. Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA, SIPC. Prior to investing in a 529 plan, investors should consider whether the investor's or designated beneficiary's home state offers any state tax or other state benefits such as financial aid, scholarship funds, and protection from creditors that are only available for investments in such state's qualified tuition program. Withdrawals used for qualified expenses are federally tax-free. Tax treatment at the state level may vary. Please consult with your tax advisor before investing.